Let the desert winds carry you back in time to a journey of trial and transformation. Imagine a nation, newly freed from centuries of bondage, standing on the threshold of a promise. The Israelites, led by Moses, had witnessed the mighty hand of God part the Red Sea and deliver them from Pharaoh's grasp. Yet freedom, they would soon learn, is not merely a destination, but a difficult, winding path through the wilderness of the human heart. This is the story of their journey, a story of miraculous provision, startling rebellion, and the unwavering mercy of God. 0. An Israelite clutches his stomach. Another points accusingly towards the horizon. The warm earth tones of the desert are dominant. The memory of Egypt's abundance, even in slavery, was a cruel mirage in the harsh, barren landscape of the Sinai. The initial euphoria of freedom had evaporated under the relentless sun, replaced by the gnawing ache of hunger. Murmurs rippled through the camp, quiet at first, then growing into a chorus of complaint. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. They cried out to Moses and Aaron. Their voices, laced with despair and accusation, echoed across the sand. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." They remembered the pots of meat, the bread they ate to the full, forgetting the sting of the whip that came with it. Faith wavered, replaced by a bitter longing for the familiar comforts of their past. They accused Moses of leading them into the wilderness to perish. But God, in his infinite patience, heard not just their rebellion, but the desperate cry of his people. He was about to teach them a profound lesson in daily dependence. The Israelites look up the ground becomes covered in a fine, frost-like substance. As morning broke, a divine miracle blanketed the camp. A fine, flaky substance, like frost on the ground, covered the desert floor. "What is it?" they asked each other in wonder. Moses explained, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." They called it manna, a heavenly provision, a daily reminder of God's faithfulness. He instructed them to gather only what they needed for that day, a test of their trust. But the grumbling did not cease entirely. The taste of miraculous bread soon grew old, and their hearts craved more. They wept for the fish, the cucumbers, the melons of Egypt. A powerful wind blows across the camp. A massive flock of quail descends, flying low to the ground. The Israelites rush out, gathering the birds with frantic energy. Once more God responded to their cries. He sent a wind from the sea, driving in quail until they covered the camp, a feathered tide of abundance. The people gathered them by the score, a feast beyond their wildest complaints. Yet this miracle came with a severe lesson. While the meat was still between their teeth, a plague struck the camp, a harsh consequence for their insatiable greed and lack of faith. It was a somber reminder that God's provision demands a grateful heart, not a demanding spirit. The wilderness was not just a place, but a classroom for the soul. The next event shows a tent where Miriam and Aaron spoke in hushed, angry tones. Their faces are cast in shadow, highlighting their jealousy. Moses married a Cushite woman with dark skin. Her name was Zipporah. The seeds of rebellion, however, did not only sprout among the masses. The seeds of rebellion took root in the hearts of those closest to Moses. His own siblings, Miriam, a prophetess, and Aaron, the high priest, began to speak against their brother. Their public complaint was about his wife, a Cushite woman, a foreigner. Their words, however, masked a deeper, more dangerous envy. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? They asked each other, their voices dripping with pride. Hasn't he also spoken through us? They coveted Moses' unique authority, the special intimacy he shared with God. They forgot that their own positions were gifts, ordained by the very same God they now implicitly challenged. This was not a disagreement. It was an attack on God's chosen order. A pillar of cloud descends dramatically before the tent of meeting. A glowing, divine light emanates from it. Miriam, Aaron, and Moses stand before it. Suddenly, the pillar of cloud, the very presence of the Lord, descended and stood at the entrance to the tent of meeting. God called Aaron and Miriam forward. His voice was not gentle. He reminded them that while he spoke to prophets in visions and dreams, with his servant Moses, he spoke face to face, clearly and without riddles. Their challenge was not just against their brother. It was a challenge against God himself. The divine light pulsed with anger. When the cloud lifted, Aaron turned to Miriam and gasped in horror. She was afflicted with leprosy, her skin as white as snow. The punishment was swift and devastatingly symbolic. She who had spoken with a venomous tongue was now physically marked, an outcast. Aaron, terrified, immediately repented, begging Moses to intercede for them. And Moses, in an act of incredible grace, cried out to the Lord, "Please, God, heal her." God, in his mercy, heard the prayer, but Miriam was to remain outside the camp for 7 days, a public lesson in humility for all of Israel to see. The next event shows the Israelites having reached the edge of a lush green land. We see giant clusters of grapes and fertile valleys in the distance. They see a brown desert with the vibrant green of the promised land. After years of wandering, they finally stood at the precipice of their destiny. Before they got to Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey, the promise whispered to Abraham centuries before. The journey was almost over. All that was left was to walk in and possess it. Moses, following God's command, selected 12 spies, one from each tribe, to scout the land and bring back a report. For 40 days they explored its riches, its fortified cities, and its people. The 12 spies returned to the camp. 10 of them look fearful and carry a bad report. Joshua and Caleb stand apart, holding a massive cluster of grapes, their expressions confident and faithful. When they returned, the camp gathered, buzzing with anticipation. The spies confirmed the land's incredible fertility, presenting a cluster of grapes so large it had to be carried on a pole between 2 men. But then the report turned dark. 10 of the spies painted a picture of terror. "The people who live there are powerful," they warned, "and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there." They described the inhabitants as giants, and in their own sight they felt like mere grasshoppers. Fear, like a poison, began to seep into the heart of the nation. A wave of despair crashed over the people. They wept through the night, their hope turning to bitter rage. "Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword?" They screamed, "Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness." In their terror, they rejected the promise and plotted to choose a new leader to take them back to slavery. Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, stood against the tide of fear. "The land we passed through is exceedingly good," they pleaded. "Do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us." But the people would not listen. Their hearts were hardened. They had seen God's power, but they chose to trust their fear instead of his promise. The consequence for this monumental failure of faith was heartbreaking. An entire generation, save for Joshua and Caleb, was condemned to wander and die in the wilderness, never to set foot in the land of promise. Another event happened in the camp. A divine judgment of 40 years in the wilderness was not enough to quell the spirit of rebellion. A Levite named Korah, a cousin to Moses and Aaron, gathered a following. He was joined by Dathan and Abiram and 250 other chieftains of the congregation, prominent men. Theirs was an organized coup, a direct and arrogant power grab. Korah confronts Moses, pointing a finger at him. Moses falls on his face in supplication. They assembled before Moses and Aaron, their accusation sharp and public. "You have gone too far." Korah declared, "The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" It was a twisted use of a holy truth. While all of Israel was indeed a holy nation, Korah used this to justify his ambition, seeking the priesthood for himself and denying God's specific appointment of Aaron and his sons. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" Moses, hearing this, fell on his face. This was not a matter for human debate. He proposed a trial by fire, a divine test. He told Korah and his followers to take their censers, their fire pans used for incense, and stand before the Lord the next day alongside Aaron. God himself would show whom he had chosen. Scene the next day. Korah and his 250 followers stand with their censers at the entrance to the tent of meeting, opposite Moses and Aaron. A glowing, intense divine glory appears. The ground around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram begins to shake. The next day the stage was set for a terrifying judgment. The glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. God commanded Moses and Aaron to separate themselves from the crowd, for his wrath was about to consume them all. Moses pleaded for the people, and God relented, instructing the congregation to move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Moses declared, "This is how you will know that the Lord has sent me. If these men die a natural death, the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them, you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt." Scene: the ground splits open with a violent crack. Glowing light emanates from the fissure. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, their families. As he finished speaking, the ground beneath the rebels split wide open. A chasm of darkness opened, and it swallowed the men, their families, and all their possessions. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the assembly. At the same time, a fire blazed forth from the presence of the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. The message was absolute, terrifying, and unmistakable. To rebel against God's appointed authority is to rebel against God himself. We see a montage of the previous scenes: the manna, the quail, Miriam's punishment, the spies, and the earth swallowing Korah. 4 rebellions, 4 lessons written in the sands. If you enjoyed this video and want us to create more content, kindly like, share, and subscribe to this channel. God bless you.